BJ here. In just a few moments, we're going to introduce her. So it's going to take me a couple of minutes, and I'm going to call her, and then we're going to pull her audio in and her video in. So it usually takes me a couple of minutes. I wish there was an easier way to do said things. But unfortunately, when you're live and you got that whole XSplit thing going, there is no real way of getting that done. Okay, so let's see where my Skype is. Where is my Skype? Your mom went through something similar? A hole in the heel of my Harley boots. Oh, you wore a hole in the heel of your Harley boot. That sucks, Nuka. Hi, Foos. Yeah, hi, Faust. How are you? How are you feeling? All right, so we're gonna stop the music there. Oh, Dahi, thank you for those 40 biddies, hon. I appreciate it. Definitely appreciate it. All right, come on, Fusa. Mom's got things to do. I shaved my other cat, Ike, because she gets these huge knots right here. And now when she walks, she looks like an angry hyena. I'm going to see if I can get a video of her walking and I can post it on Instagram. But she has from here back, like, shaved. And so she's a very furry kitty. And when she walks, she looks very angry when she walks. Morning Rise. Mwah, thank you for that host. No, my kitties need their fur. All right, let's no, oops, I can't spell because I've got a cat on me. Oh yeah, she's Fusa. She's Fusa. She is my kitty. So let's get on to our web show scene for Coffee Chat of Horrors. Let's see, what do we do here? Awesome, Faust. I'm glad you're on new meds. Oh, no, kitten. Cats, man. She's gonna break things. All right. We are talking to BJ Colangelo today. Good morning, Daywalkers. I am Reanimate Her, and this is Coffee Chat of Horrors, the only horror show that takes its coffee like its magic, black. Today, we'll be talking to BJ Colangelo, writer, director, and actress. So make sure you slap on that SPF 666, grab yourself a buddy bucket of brains, and enjoy the show. We're going to be giving her a call right meow as we speak. Hi, BJ. How are you?
Hi.
I am going to capture your video.
Sure.
And let's see, where is it here? And then I will introduce you to the Horde, and you can give us a little bit about yourself and
Sure.
and all that fun stuff. Let's make this there. Let's bring that down. Perfect. Okay, hold on. My cat is walking all over me.
I was watching from my phone earlier, so I got to see the cat walking.
Oh, yes. She's a princess kitty. Good morning, Horde. This is BJ Colangelo. Am I saying your last name correctly?
You're close. You get it sort of the way that my substitute teachers would pronounce it, but it's Colangelo.
Colangelo. I thought it was.
I like to say that I'm a syllable short away from being a Ninja Turtle because it's like Michelangelo, but just Colangelo.
I got you. How is the volume sounding right now, guys? Is it good? Do you need BJ up, or can it be louder? Yeah, of course it can be louder. Riggs, let's do this. How's that?
How am I? Am I loud enough?
She's kind of low. She's clear, but she can go up. That's weird. I have her at 100%.
Does this help if I'm closer to this microphone?
All right, let's see if we can move her to a... Oh, no, system. Let's try this. Okay, try talking now. Let's see how that works.
Okay, this is me talking. I hope you can hear me.
Any better? Sometimes we have this weird audio thing with you can hear her.
Can you hear me now? Does this help?
She's just low. Still a little on the quiet side. Okay. I will try to be quiet. I don't know what our issue is with Skype, but sometimes we have our problems with Skype. There we go. That works.
Technology.
Oh, yeah. It could be a pain in the ass. It's low compared to you, but I can hear it. Should I lower my voice? Maybe that'll help. Okay, so as long as we don't talk, no, I can't get Skype any louder. I'm at 100%. I'm at 100% here. Let's see if Skype has any. I don't see any volume control for Skype, honestly. Nope. But you guys should be able to hear her regardless. No, it's not my system sounds. It's at 100%, Reeks. When I say it's at 100%, if I was to if I was to turn on YouTube right now, your eardrums would blow away. But this is Skype. I never have a good time with Skype. So let me introduce BJ Colangelo. Yes, I'm going to remember that now. She is a writer for hire specializing in film, professional wrestling, LGBTQ issues, fatness, gender theory, and sex. Woo! She has been published on Vulture, Daily Dot, Fangoria, Playboy, and much, much more. It's a pleasure for me to bring BJ on the show to give us and discuss to us about her industry that she is in, her experiences in the industry. So I'm going to let BJ take the stage here and let us know more about you.
Sure. So my name is BJ Colangelo. I have been writing in horror for about, I would say probably about 11 or 12 years now. I feel like I'm getting so old. But I have a tendency to analyze horror. That's what I love to do. So it's not just reviewing this movie's good or this movie's bad. It's analyzing, why do we like this horror movie? What is it about this horror movie that impacts how we then relate to our fellow human? How does it help us internalize our own fears and our own issues? That's sort of where my interests lie. And a lot of that deals with my own intersections. So I look at a lot of queer theory. I look at a lot of gender theory. I look a lot at sexuality and sex just in general and representation that way. But I also have other interests. So I love professional wrestling. I made a movie called Powerbomb, and it's a horror movie about professional wrestling starring wrestlers. But I make films, I write films, and I analyze them. And that's sort of why I'm here with y'all today.
That's awesome. Thank you for that introduction. Powerbomb, you say? That's what it's called?
Mm-hmm. It's called nice. Powerbomb.
Uh-huh.
I co-directed it with a guy named Zach Shilwachter, even harder last name than mine.
Yeah, I would say.
But it's about a fan who really can't understand the difference between fantasy and reality of a wrestler, and he kidnaps him. And I've got a lot of indie wrestlers in it. So we've got Matt Cross, who most people would know as Son of Havoc on Lucha Underground. Dr. Britt Baker before she became a doctor from AEW, and then some indie mainstays like Gregory Iron and Dick Justice. So it's a really cool project, and it's nice because it's also accessible. Even if you don't know anything about wrestling,
right?
You can enjoy it just the same.
Nice. We do have many wrestling fans in here, so if you like horror and wrestling, Powerbomb is where it's at. Where can we find this film?
It is currently on all of the VOD platforms. So if you buy your movies on iTunes, Amazon Prime, I think it's still on Comcast, like Xfinity from Comcast, and like their pay to play. Yeah, so it's you're able to find it. Some places, I think it might be on Amazon for DVD, but it sold out pretty quickly, which was nice because it's a smaller release. But VOD is where it's at.
Yeah, well, nowadays VOD is definitely where it's at. No movie theaters are open, right? It's been a challenging time for everybody in the industry.
Oh yeah, it's been really difficult. I live walking distance from my movie theater,
Hmm.
so that's like church to me. It's like, "Oh, gotta go once a week. We have to go to the movies." And having to see it every day and knowing that I can't go inside has just been brutal.
Yeah, and that sucks because movie theaters are fun, and we have no idea when they will be opening up again,
Right.
which kind of sucks. When all of our movies are being pushed back, Candyman's being pushed
Oh
back,
my gosh,
Halloween,
yes.
all of them are being pushed back because they want that theatrical release.
Mhm.
I understand it.
And
Um,
horror is one of those genres that really benefits from that audience sort of experience. You like to be able to scream with each other. You can feel that energy of everybody tensing.
yeah.
And you can definitely get that same experience at home. It's just not the same. The magnitude isn't there when it's not in the theater.
Yep, and the sound, the speakers
Oh
they
yeah.
have, right? The speakers, it makes everything, was it Dolby surround sound or whatever it is? It just makes everything more intense, especially the suspenseful parts of a movie, especially a horror film, when you know there's something gonna happen, but you don't know when it's gonna happen, and that music kicks in. It usually brings up the little, you know, little goosebumps on the back of the neck. We don't get that
Mhm.
experience at home. I mean, unless you have a theater, but most of us don't have no theaters in our
Right.
home. I'm
I
one of them.
I have my built-in sound bar, and I mean, I've been very fortunate that I live very close to a drive-in that's still functioning, so
Oh,
I have been
nice.
able to see movies at the drive-in. But horror, as much as it feels like, oh, horror is a drive-in genre, so many horror movies are so dark, and it's really difficult to see sometimes at the drive-in.
Oh,
So
yeah.
luckily, it's been films that I've seen before. The last time we went, it was Poltergeist and The Shining. So I know
That's
them
nice.
front to back. So if I can't see something, it's fine. I know that this tree is going to come crashing through the window. We're okay here.
Right, right. Yeah, no, drive-ins are great, but yeah, movies, I agree with you, especially horror movies, they're filmed dark in dark
Hmm.
places and all the lights. From in my province, since I'm in Canada, I don't know of any drive-ins that are still around, which is sad because I think drive-ins
Hmm.
would make a really big comeback right now. Social distancing, you can sit in your car, windows up, don't have to worry about a damn
Right.
thing, and you're watching a movie with people, right?
Yeah.
You,
It's You get the communal experience of going to the movies without having to put your health at risk.
exactly. I've been to drive-ins a few times. I know, Kit, you're probably they've probably closed by the time you were born. It's definitely a sad time when those started disappearing because movie houses took their place. No longer
Right.
were there drive-ins, and so the theaters took that over. Um, our son does stay up too late here. Yes, in the summertime, our son stays up till like 10, 11 o'clock at night and needs to go to sleep so we can see drive-in theaters. It ruins our fireworks.
Yeah, our drive-in, I think you
Sic
can get in,
gaudiamus allus
much
ut
earlier, but the
petus
movies
nunc,
themselves don't start until
who
like
gladly
nine
feast
thirty,
on
nine
those
forty
wouldst
p.m.
yours.
Okay, yeah.
So it's a late night, and luckily they still do the double feature, but that's still a late night. If you have to work the next day,
That it is.
you're gonna be dragging.
Yep, that it is. It you gotta go to work, you gotta get up early in the morning, you're like, oh crap, the movie was good, but I don't know if it was that good for me not to be able to sleep.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm a night owl. I have a difficult time actually getting to sleep, so it works
Same.
really well to stay up late watching drive-in movies, but then I'm, sleeping in until noon the next day and then I feel like I've wasted my day.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you sleep in, with the days that you wake up early, I'm like, I don't really want to be up, but I get so much done. And then the
Right.
days you sleep in was like, oh, that was so nice, but oh my God, the day is almost over. So much to do. I agree, Serial. I miss the double features and the commercials. You remember in the beginning of the movie, before the movie would start, the little characters that came on the
Mhm.
screen, and oh,
Well, I discovered recently they have all of those commercials on Amazon Prime. It's like drive-in commercials and you get your dancing hot dog, you get the whole deal and they're just there to watch
right.
commercials. It's very sweet.
Yeah, that's awesome. Definitely. If you guys are interested in that, you can check it out over on Amazon. You go to bed at 2 or 3 and wake up at 8. Yeah, right? Who needs sleep?
Ooh.
Who needs it? So I have a question for you. Being in the horror industry, any industry in the filming industry is majority men. What
Hmm.
is it like being a female writer, author, director, filmmaker in the horror industry?
It has its benefits and its massive, massive downsides.
Yeah.
Um, the benefit is that for the first time, I am able to also find a lot of like-minded people. I have a great crew of other women that are working in the industry that are writing about it, and it's nice to have these shared experiences of, oh, I grew up watching the Monster Squad, and we only had one character that we could relate to versus all of our guy friends who had 4 or 5 characters they could relate to. So it's nice to have that. It's also nice knowing that I'm able to bring a perspective and a gaze that really hasn't been featured for many, many years. So
Hmm.
everything that I'm doing still sort of seems fresh at the time, which is nice. That's a really good feeling. Downsides, working it as anybody from a marginalized gender identity in film, in especially genre film. There
Hmm.
are a lot of people that wish that I just wasn't there. I constantly have, the fanboy sort of things of like, oh, you say you like horror? Well, answer this trivia question.
Oh my
Um,
God.
that
Yes.
nonsense is ridiculous, and criticism becomes also very personal. If a guy is writing a review or an analysis of a horror film and someone disagrees with them, usually it's met with like, oh, you're a hack, or you don't know what you're talking about, or you're stupid. But if I write it, then it becomes very gendered. Like I get the B word thrown at me. My appearance will get thrown into it. Like, well, of course, someone who looks like that would have that opinion. So any criticism is very personal. It's never about the work. It's about my character as a human. And then I'm also a queer woman. I'm married to a beautiful, wonderful, incredible trans woman, and there are a lot of people who have a lot of thoughts and opinions about that.
Oh
So
God,
that
yeah.
then gets used to justify their criticism of my work as well. It's never about what I'm actually saying, it's about who I am. And that's very frustrating.
And I can see that being very frustrating because they're not attacking the review, they're attacking you personally. And
Correct.
I've seen that a lot of places.
I think that it's something that, yeah, anybody from a marginalized gender identity, they have to deal with it. And by have to deal with it, it's not meant to say that, like, oh, that's just, it comes with the territory. But it's something that we all have had to develop this really thick skin, not only to just, I mean, survive in just the world in general, but also in our work environments, because this does happen and we have to prepare ourselves for it, to make sure that we can handle it, that our mental health can be taken care of. We have to do those check-ins constantly. So we're working twice as hard than our male counterparts because this isn't something that they have to deal with.
I agree. I agree. I mean, I interview different filmmakers, and the majority that have been on my show have been men. And to listen to their side of how they feel being in the industry, especially being independent filmmakers,
Hmm.
because that's a whole other challenge in itself, being an independent, right?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
how people look at them and how they get looked at. And then I would read some of their reviews that they would get on YouTube and other articles. And I'm just like, okay, I can see that. And then I've seen articles written by females, and you can definitely see that they go for the attack more personal than on the guys. So maybe one day we can change that.
I would love if that would happen. And what's interesting is, so I've been going by my initials for a majority of my life, but
Mm-hmm.
my initials are short for Brittany Jade. But if you don't have my name reads gender neutral. So I also get the experience of people who either are familiar with my work but never took the time to look at the picture on the byline. Um, will hear, oh, BJ Colangelo's coming to this, like, oh, I love their opinion, I want to listen to them, and they'll show up and then they see me,
Yeah.
and it's not what they were expecting. They're like, oh, you're a girl, and it's like, yeah, yeah, I am. And that's always really interesting. Or I've gone to film festivals where some of my short films have played, and it's the same thing, directed by BJ Colangelo, and then it's like, oh, that's a woman. oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because we sort of default our brains to thinking like directing in horror must be a man. And that's not always the case. There are so many women and non binary folks and trans folks that are directing really cool horror short films.
Mm-hmm.
It's
There
just about
is.
giving that access, letting people know that they exist.
Yeah. I agree. And this is why I like doing Coffee Chat of Horrors, because I search for people. I look for people to bring on the show. I ask other content creators if they know anybody in the industry. And I like looking at the horror genre because that's my genre. That's what I live and
Mhm.
breathe. So, I met BJ via Cataly. Cataly let me know about you, and she sent me some information. She talked to you, and I was like, oh, this is great. And I like having the show to bring people like you on to talk about your experiences, talk about what coming projects you have, any movies that we should see. There is a movie of yours that I've been trying to find and I can't
Mhm.
find it. It's called Death December.
So Death December is a holiday horror anthology. The best way you can describe it is it's very similar to an advent calendar where each day you open your little door,
Uh-huh.
but they're all short films. It's an international project, so there are
Mm-hmm.
directors from all over the world. Some of the bigger names like Lucky McKee's in there, Trent Haga, and then also like Mr. Cannibal Holocaust himself, Rogerio Deodato is one of the directors, which is incredible.
Right?
Death December is still doing surprisingly, it's still doing a festival run. All of these film festivals have gone virtual
Yeah.
since the pandemic hit. So it's been nice that people from all across the world are still getting these little tidbits and everyone's talking about it. Because the beauty of an anthology is there's lots of things to choose from. There's something for everybody.
Yeah.
So if maybe day, whatever is not for you, maybe the next day will be. And I do have a segment in that. That one is also co-directed with my former creative partner who I made Powerbomb with. And ours is called They Used to Laugh and Call Him Names. So I'm sure you can use your imagination to figure out what sort of story we're telling with that one.
Mm-hmm.
But it's fun, it's gross, it's very gory,
Nice.
and I'm really looking forward to seeing when it's going to be available for mass consumption. My belief is probably sometime around the holiday season.
Okay.
Preferably, I would prefer that it's this year, but
Right.
the festival run and everything being canceled or pushed online has really changed the releases for everything.
Oh, it definitely has. It's changed the release, how they also make money. Like, how do you recoup the
Yeah.
millions of dollars that you put out in creating, or thousands of dollars that you put out creating these, books, magazines, movies, TV
Yeah.
shows? How do you get that back when it's VOD? And no one's going to pay $50 for a VOD, right?
Right.
So you're losing
And
those movie
it's
prices.
the in my thoughts on it. I mean, it's very much a case by case basis. I mean, when they released like the Trolls movie for VOD, I was like, well, that's perfect because that's a family film. Typically,
Mm-hmm.
these families are going to spend, 60, $70 just to go to
Easily.
the movies to pay for all the kids and all the popcorn. So that's great for that to go on VOD. That makes perfect sense. But then I look at a film that, like, one I'm really excited about that I saw is getting a VOD release is Antebellum. And I'm like, this movie
Mm-hmm.
looks so good and I'm so excited to see it. But is this going to have the same sort of return as it would have if it went theatrical? And, we're not going to know until it comes out, and then we'll be able
Unfortunately,
to look at those numbers. But I'm hoping that it does well because it looks like a great
it
horror
does.
movie.
Yes, it looks good. And I think it also sucks because we as fans, as viewers, we miss that experience of the theater. Like, we don't realize how important the theater is when it comes to sound and the acoustics
Mhm.
and visually. You're looking at a huge giant screen compared to your 40-inch TV or 50-inch, and you just don't have that sound. So I think the whole thing, the movie, the theater, your friends going into the theater, it all makes for an amazing experience for the moviegoer. We lose that when we sit at home and watch it on VOD.
Yeah, and I think There's also a sense of urgency when it comes to the theater of, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I want to get in there. I want to see it now. I want to see it opening weekend. And when you don't get that chance at home, you then have to hope someone doesn't spoil it on your Twitter feed, or someone doesn't post like a video clip or a GIF or something from it that you haven't seen. And you have to sort of be on extra high alert. And that can also be a little tricky.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. We have another question for you.
Sure.
I see that there's a horror comedy that your name was in 2020 release. You want to tell us a little bit more about it? It says it's the TV show is called It Listens from the Radio.
Yes. Okay. I'm so excited somebody brought this up. So, It Listens from the Radio is actually a radio drama, and it is a comedy radio drama. So, think about it. You find it wherever you find your podcasts.
Right.
But it is made by Lonely Spectre Productions, and it's very campy. It's very 1950s. So each story is a different monster, and they're all brought together. It's another anthology, but they're all brought
Mm-hmm.
together by this alien radio entity that is going through the airwaves and then, corrupting whatever it interacts with. And there are some pretty awesome voiceover artists on there, most of which are from the drag community. So there's a lot, like Peaches Christ is in an episode, Bitch Puddin' is in an episode. So it's
Nice.
very, very fun. And I wrote and lent my voice to one. My segment is called The Kingpin versus the Teenage Werewolf versus the Kingpin. And it is exactly what it sounds like. It is a teenage kid transforming to a werewolf and fighting like the head of the bowling league. It's
That sounds
ridiculous.
good.
It's ridiculous. It's very fun. But because it's a radio play, we're playing with descriptions, we're playing with sound. And it was definitely an adventure to have to find creative ways for characters to talk about like someone's head getting ripped off and being used like a bowling ball,
Right.
because you can't actually show it because it's a radio play.
Yep.
But it was all recorded in quarantine. So we all recorded our segments from our varying homes, different places in the world, and the incredible team at Lonely Spectre put it all together and made a show for it, so people can definitely listen to it at any moment. I cannot confirm nor deny if there will be a second season,
Ooh.
but it was a lot of fun. It's a great campy, cheesy, fun way to get a little like joy and fun horror into your
Right.
life during all of this.
Oh, for sure. It sounds like it would be pretty awesome. And we'll be able to find it on any
Hmm.
Spotify, iTunes, all the
All
major.
of them, they're all there.
And
Yep.
is it out now? Or
Yep,
when
it's
is
out now.
it's out now? So do you hear
Yeah.
that, guys? It is out. It's called It Listens from the Radio. I'm gonna be checking out. I highly suggest that you guys check it out. If you have Spotify, type that in the search bar. If you don't, go to Google, type it on in, and let me know if you see it, because if you hear it, because I'm gonna watch it as well. The title is It Listens from the Radio.
Hmm.
I'll put it in chat here as well, so we have it.
Awesome. I am so excited someone brought that up. That was my sanity at the beginning of quarantine, was getting to focus my energy in on that, and then I didn't have to think about the world crashing all around me.
Oh, for sure. When I have guests on, I look into them. I want to genuinely know about you, and my
Mhm.
community does as well. So when I bring people on, I want them to know that I do care. I want to know what you're doing before I bring you on the show. And I've been looking for December for like 3 months. And I was trying to find it everywhere, and I'm just like, damn, I can't find it. Um, but I will keep my eyes out towards the holiday season if it drops this year. But
I'm
yes, I
really
do. I
hoping
like.
it does.
Right? I hope so. I would love to see another horror holiday. That's a lot of fun. The title is definitely interesting. Bam. Definitely is. Um,
It's very clever. I like it a
yeah,
lot.
I like the name of it. And when I was doing my research, and it came up under IMBD as a TV show, not as a podcast.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so or audio file, however it's gonna be called. But yeah, that's what I found because I was searching, doing different things, and I'm like, ooh, I started reading it, and I'm like, oh, this sounds like it's gonna be fun.
It's very fun, and it's a great they're also very short, so if you
Yep.
only have, like, 15 minutes, you need to listen to something while you're getting ready for the day, you've got it, and there's also, like, little after hours, episodes, and the after hours episodes are just ways to promote other creatives, musicians, people who, were putting out new material, during the pandemic that, maybe they would have otherwise done as like a concert. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
nope, here's an episode. We're shouting out this band, and they were all like independent creators as well. So
Oh,
it's
nice.
a it was really nice, and it's very much sort of a community. Like, we support you, we love you. Here is our gift to you.
Right. That's nice. Hi, Dillinger. How are you? Now the other question I have for you is: I know that you have been in a lot of TV shows, movies, and is there a favorite one that you really love to do out of all of those shows and that you have been in?
Let's see. I think that my absolute favorite thing to do, I love to write. Writing is the thing that makes me the happiest. And I think it's because I've spent so many years as a fan trying to see myself or see characters that I relate to, that aren't always easy for me to relate to. Maybe it's a character that shares the same morals or the same sense of humor, but they're a guy. So now I have to see myself through a guy. Or it's a character that I really, really champion and I love them, but they're straight. And it's like, okay, well, I have to see myself now through the straight character. So I love writing because I have the ability to take control of the narrative. I can create the characters that I wish I would have had when I was younger. So I have a short film that is still doing festivals. I'm likely going to release it around Halloween. So there you go. You get the inside scoop that it'll get released for the public on Halloween.
Oh,
But I have a
nice.
short film called Labrys. And for those that don't know, a labrys is like the double-headed axe,
Yep.
and it was also a symbol on the very first lesbian pride flag. So it is a queer horror romance with like sort of superhero vibes in it, and it is the first project that I wrote and directed after really coming into my own. I've been very open about my queerness for my entire life, but I never really fully went like full in, like, no, this is who I am, and this is an important part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote a character. It's an interracial couple. It's a queer story. It's dealing with, street harassment. But then it also has all these horror elements. And writing those characters, I was writing the characters I wish I would have had when I was younger.
Yeah.
A story that I wish I would have seen, before I was in my late 20s. And the feedback has been really, really awesome because it's played at some festivals. It played at Final Girls Berlin.
Oh, nice.
It's played at a couple different horror festivals stateside, but the response has been overwhelming with, other queer people who were like, oh my gosh, it was so nice to see this. Oh my gosh, it was so, like, I don't remember the last time I've seen, a queer character like this before. And it made me feel like, oh, I did something good. I did
Yeah, for
something
sure.
purposeful. So Labrys is definitely my favorite, and it'll probably go live around Halloween just so that everybody can have access to it while it finishes its festival run.
That's awesome. So mark that in your calendars, guys, around Halloween time. Can you give
Hmm.
us the spelling of labyrinth?
Sure. Labrys is Labyrs.
Perfect. Thank you. I want to make sure I pop that out to the chat so they can copy it, put it in their things. Right there's Labrys around Halloween time. So if you guys want to check it out, make sure you put it there. um, so as a writer, a director, and actress, out of the three, which one has caused its most challenges for you?
that's a difficult
Cause
question.
it's, yeah, cause but I think the three bring their own challenges to the menu as well, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think my instinct is to say directing because there's a lot of having to continually prove myself because so many people, believe it or not, believe that women can't direct films.
Oh yes.
So it's the constant having to like push and prove, no, I can do this. Or the idea that like, no, I am the director and you need to take me seriously. Don't go talk to the male producer, talk to me. I'm the director. That can be really difficult. But of the three, um, in all actuality, the one that I think brings the most challenges is acting. And it's for a multitude of reasons. So I've been acting since I was a child. I was, that insufferable theater kid in everyone's class. Me. That was me. Um, so I've done a lot of musicals, a lot of straight plays. But what is so hard about it is obviously, as you can tell, I have shaved head on this side, and I wear makeup the way that I do. Um, I'm not a small person, and acting is very unforgiving to people who don't fit a very specific sort of look.
Yep.
And it's also very frustrating because even when characters are like quote unquote alternative characters, there is a tendency to still cast somebody who looks a little bit more conventional and then like put them in makeup and costumes rather than somebody who that is who they are. Um,
Yep.
so it can be very difficult and very limiting, because there have definitely been times when I've been told, to my face from a director in a show, yeah, you were the best one here today, but costume budget's a little tight and we already have this dress and you wouldn't fit into it. And it's like, wow, okay. Like, so
Yeah.
that's really hard, because it's hard not to take it personally. It's
Well,
really
yeah.
hard not to take it personally. But I've sort of taken this stance moving forward, and one of the reasons that I haven't been doing as much acting recently as I've done in the past is I've sort of made this standard for myself that if my external appearance and the way that I choose to present myself to the world, if that is going to be the thing that prevents somebody from casting me based on my talent, that's not a person that I want to work with anyway.
Nope. Nope. They should want you for your experience, your talent. Just because you
Mm-hmm.
look like, that's why we have makeup, wigs, and costumes.
Mm-hmm.
We can transform you into anything. So what's the big deal
Absolutely.
what you look like on the outside when you go in for a reading, like when you're sitting there and you're reading a script? What does your outer appearance have anything to do with it?
Exactly. If
Um
if we are willing to take actors and transform them into like completely new characters with costume, wardrobe, makeup, to
yeah.
the point where we give them massive awards and huge acclaim because oh my gosh, they look nothing like them,
Yeah.
then why is it so outside of the realm of possibility that someone who just happens to have green hair can easily put on a brown wig and play, somebody a little bit more neutralized? Like it's not hard. You do it all the time, but
Exactly.
it's always in the reverse, and it's very frustrating. But I've been very fortunate that I live in Cleveland, Ohio currently,
Hmm.
and pre the world happening, um, there's a theater in Cleveland that focuses a lot on sort of alternative shows, things like Evil Dead the musical, things like Bat Boy the musical, where it's a lot more forgiving for someone who looks like me to perform and nobody is going to question it. So I've done a lot of work in that theater. Titles like Rocky Horror, We Will Rock You, which is a Queen musical. So it's a
Right?
musical made of
Yep.
all of Queen music. So in those instances, it's like, no, you're great. Don't change a thing.
Well, yeah, we can change. Was it Robert Downey Jr. who played in Tropical Thunder
Oh
as a
yes,
black man?
when he's his
Okay,
character is a black man.
we can change a white man into a black man on film. So I think we should be able to change your appearance to anything that they need. Like,
it, it's not, if we can turn people into cats, I
exactly.
think we're fine. I think we can fix this. It won't be hard. I mean, my hair already picks up green screen. I can't use Zoom backgrounds
No.
because it tries to pull everything from my hair so that I'm just one with the background.
Right. Yeah, I love green screens. They can be fun.
Yeah, they're super fun.
Dillinger Banks has a question for you. Uh,
Sure,
I
sure.
I seen your final girl pin on your vest. There's been some talk about how the term final girl can be seen as demeaning or patronizing as it focuses on the character's gender rather than
Hmm.
the character's inherent strength. In The Search of Darkness, Heather Langenkamp said that the term makes her cringe now. Do you feel final girl is demeaning, dismissive, or patronizing in any way?
So I have two schools of thoughts on this. So the one thing that you are lucky with is that I am queen of nuance. I love having nuanced discussions. I'm definitely not a black and white thinker. I'm a gray area thinker. So when it comes to the term final girl, so the reason that I keep it personally on here is because of what that trope represents to me, which is somebody who's a survivor, somebody who is a fighter, somebody who is really working as hard as they possibly can to survive. I am
Mm-hmm.
somebody who has experienced a great deal of trauma in my life. So I wear that sort of title as like a badge of honor.
Mm-hmm.
I also wear it as a badge of honor because as somebody who experienced a lot of this trauma as an age where I would have been considered a girl, and there's a lot of people who even use the word girl in a demeaning way, like you throw ball like a
Oh,
girl.
yep.
So for me, I'm like, oh, you're going to use that as an insult? Well, now it's mine and I'm going to wear it and I'm going to feel proud of it.
Yeah.
At that same time, that is my personal journey with the phrase and the expression, the trope final girl. And women are not a monolith. And there are plenty of women who see that and they're like, I think it's demeaning. I don't want to be identified solely based on my gender identity and not my characteristics as a human. That's also totally valid. And these the beauty of language and the beauty of a lot of these discussions is that it's going to be different for everybody. Horror as a genre is one that we're all brought together because fear is a universal emotion. We're all afraid of something, but what we're afraid of is different for every single person
For sure.
based on our lived experiences, our backgrounds, our exposure to things. That greatly dictates how we feel about horror. And in that same token, our lived experiences are also going to give us differing perspectives on things like final girl. I
Right.
think personally that like final girl is a little bit limiting because we know final boys exist. Shout out to Jesse, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2.
Yep.
Final boys exist.
They do.
But for me, I use it for my own personal journey
Right.
and not necessarily the one that's in film. But that's a really good question.
It is a really good question. And, everyone has opinions on how things make us all feel, right? But that's also what gives us viewpoints on things. And we can
Mhm.
have open discussions and talk about that. Well, most can, some cannot.
It's
Uh,
very true.
Dillinger says, I see Final Girl as someone who goes up against an unstoppable force and comes out on top, especially when once upon a time in movies, females were expected to die or be saved by a big, strong dude. Final
Mhm.
girls became their own heroes. Me, that's how I see it as well, Dillinger. Throughout history, women have always been the one either to die or they have to be saved by a man when in all we are strong enough to save ourselves. Okay, maybe
Mhm.
sometimes a helping hand is always good. This is why you don't like Disney films, but um but definitely that's how I feel about Final Girl. It's showing somebody who would have been taken as for dead coming back and kicking ass and taking names actually. So that was a really good question. Thank you, Dillinger, for asking that. Hi,
Yeah, thank
Nuclear.
you.
So since we're on horror movies, Final Girls, what is your favorite horror movie?
So you are all fortunate that I'm recording this and sort of like I'm on a sewing table right now. if you were in my bedroom, then you would have to see what like a sick obsessed individual I am. But my favorite movie of all time is Fright Night from 1985. I have a shrine in my room to the film. I have like 6 different pieces of art. I have framed stills. I have
Nice.
like a Jerry Dandridge shadow box. I also have also pro tip, I am not wearing pants right now, but I have a thigh tattoo of a fruit bat holding an apple, wearing a red scarf, like the iconic red scarf that he wears.
Yep.
Fright Night 1985 is my favorite horror movie, and honestly my favorite movie of all time. I'm obsessed with it. I have been since I was a kid. It does everything right for me. It's funny. It's got very smart writing. It has iconic
Mm-hmm.
characters. It has great costuming. The soundtrack is fun, and it's also got a lot of queer theory and a lot of elements to analyze. And so that just all the
Definitely
all the
does.
sensors are firing off, and it's everything that I want in a horror movie.
Yeah, I agree. I really like Fright Night. I love the original. The remake wasn't bad, but the original had something to it that the remake was missing, and I don't know what it is, but I mean, it wasn't a bad remake. There's just
Right.
something there that wasn't that they missed. I don't know what it is, but I watched both, and
Yeah, I don't actively dislike the remake.
right.
But for me, Chris Sarandon's performance as Jerry Dandridge is just it's really untouchable, and the closest comparison that I've ever been able to make to that performance is Dan Stevens in The Guest, where you have this person that no matter what they're doing, you just can't look away from them. You're just captivated by them. There's just this oozing of confidence, and you know they're a bad guy. Like you
Mm-hmm.
know you're not supposed to like them, but you can't help it. And Colin Farrell's performance in the remake, I think he's trying to emulate that, but
Yeah.
he's not that, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Right. And his persona of that was not. It wasn't as big as the other performance, right? So maybe he was trying too hard. I'm not too sure. Maybe he was trying to hone in something that he just doesn't
Hmm.
have. It's not a bad remake, though. It is definitely not a
It's
bad
not.
remake.
No, it's a very fun remake. The I have the same feelings about the Fright Night remake as I
Mm-hmm.
do about Let Me In, which is the only problem with these movies is that their originals exist.
Yeah.
Like if those originals didn't exist, these would be great movies that we would probably all be like, "Oh, this is fabulous. I love it. I love it." But because we know what the original source material is, we're like, "You tried. You were close."
Right. Right. Um, Making the viewer related to the antagonist is powerful. Oh, yeah. Yeah. When you can relate to one of the characters, for sure. Even
Oh
in video
yeah.
games, same
Oh
thing,
yeah.
right?
I will be the first to admit I love horror. It is my thing. It is everything that I love. Horror video games, I have to watch playthroughs. I can't play them myself. My adrenaline levels spike up so high that I like throw up. It's like I can't do it. So even watching playthroughs when all the Resident Evil remakes have been happening, I'll watch playthroughs
Right.
and I'll sit there and I'm like, "No, I hate this. Oh, I hate it so much because I know it's coming."
I love our horror video games. And that's what I like about playing them. They give me that anxiety, that sweaty palm
Oh,
feeling that
yeah.
I'm missing in the
Oh,
films
yeah.
now. I don't get I love horror so much, and I've seen so many films, so many TV shows that I don't get scared, that scared feeling anymore.
Mhm.
And I think that's why horror games appeal to me so much is I don't know what's going to happen. I don't ever look into the game before I play it either. I love playing it
That's
blind.
smart. That's smart.
But I also like that anxiety that it gives me, the sweaty palms. Like I know something's gonna happen, but I don't know when it's gonna happen. And just to feel that over again, it. I don't know. It's really fun for me to feel that feeling all over again. I really miss that in films. I think I desensitized myself.
Which that's probably and honestly, that's probably what happened. Something that I'm actually working on for it'll be published in probably like 2 weeks or so, and I can't
Hmm.
say who I'm publishing it with, but
Ah, okay.
it'll be on social media. But I'm doing a piece on the science of jump scares in our bodies,
Uh
because what a
huh.
lot of people don't recognize is the way that something scares us is totally dependent on our fight, flight, and freeze responses. So if you're the type of person that when you are scared, your instinct is to run away, to flee, you tend to be more susceptible to jump scares. If you're
Mm-hmm.
somebody who is like, nope, I'm here, I'm going to fight, you're able usually to kind of power through that adrenaline. I'm a fleer all day. My body is like, leave, get out of the situation.
Right.
And I also have a condition where I overproduce adrenaline. So that means my body kind of short circuits. And
Mm-hmm.
that means that even though I've watched so many horror movies over the years, I am still that person in the theater who jumps because there's a loud noise and it's not controllable. It doesn't mean that I don't appreciate horror as much as
Right.
somebody. It doesn't mean I'm not a true fan. It just means, no, my body reacts this way. I don't have control over it,
Yeah.
but I love that feeling, right? Just like you were saying with that anxiety, I love that feeling. So fortunately, because my levels are already so much higher, I can watch like the most basic horror movie and still be like, but okay, I'm good. Whereas like a horror video game, like that puts me over the edge. I'm not allowed to go to haunted houses because I reflexively like will hit, and I've
Right.
definitely hit people working at haunted houses because they've scared me, and my reflex is to like boom, do something
Right.
and flee. So I just made it to myself like, I don't go to haunted houses anymore because I get too scared and I don't want to hurt someone who's just trying to do their job.
Right? You get knocked the fuck out just for jumping out at me, bitch.
Right. And it's like, I don't want to do that to you. You did a good job. I'm
Right.
sorry that I can't control my limbs.
It's just a natural response. There are sometimes that I'm watching a movie, the jump scares get me. But a jump scare is quick and it comes at you and it's gone. I
Yes.
miss that build up of suspense
Mhm.
when watching a film, like watching that build up. I remember being younger and watching Friday the 13th and like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? And having that build up and then seeing it happen, like, oh my God, right?
Oh
Um,
yeah, I
def-
love that like creeping dread. I
yeah,
like to call it. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I'm very interested in what's coming out in 2 weeks that you can't tell us who's publishing. So I'm going to make sure that I watch your Twitter. Can we get the exclamation point guest command up so you guys can make sure that if you are on Twitter that you are following BJ. If you are interested in any of the works that she's doing, it's a great way to contact her as well. Her email
Mhm.
address is right there. And keep your eye out if you're fascinated about the jump scares. I am. I'm all about the jump scares. So I will definitely be watching for that. And I will tell you guys about it when it releases because it'll be all over my social media as well.
Perfect. I love it.
Freak Guy wants to know, what are you most excited about with Nia De Casas Candyman?
Okay, so I have such a core relationship with just Candyman in general because I grew up right outside Chicago. So my introduction to Candyman was actually at a sleepover where somebody had recounted the story of Candyman from the movie, but told it to me as if it were a real urban legend. So we played, Candyman in the mirror. I freaked out because, again, skittish person, high levels of adrenaline. So I freaked out and I was so scared for like 2 weeks. I was like, Candyman's gonna get me. Oh my gosh, Candyman's gonna get me. And then my mom heard me talking about it and she's like, are you talking about the movie? And I was like, no, mom, I'm talking about Candyman, the person. She's like, I don't know what you're. No, this is a movie. You have no idea what you're talking about. So she showed me the movie. At this point, I was probably like 10 or 11. And I watched the movie. And I think she thought this would make me feel less scared, but it didn't because it was Chicago. So I recognized landmarks. I was like, I
Right.
know that building. This is real. I know that building. This is real. And I like lost it. So Candyman I think he was like one of my first slashers. Like he was one of my first ones.
Right.
The thing that I am most excited for with Nia De Casas Candyman is that it's not a remake and it's not like a direct sequel. It seems to be a continuation
Mm-hmm.
of this urban legend impact. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that is fascinating. I think that is such a smart idea. And that trailer, like, that's the trailer they play at all of the drive-ins, and I sit there and I'm just like, I can't wait, it looks so good.
Oh,
all
yes.
I want.
I am super excited for Candyman. I'm going to show my age. I went to see Candyman on opening night.
So jealous.
I was old enough to go into an R-rated film when it came out. It scared the shit out of me. I couldn't use the bathroom with a mirror in it in my house.
Right.
And in my home, I grew up in an old home. So when you had that medicine chest and it also pulled out of the wall, yeah, ours did that as well. And it was one of the ones where you walk into the bathroom and you open up the mirror and there's all your stuff inside. I had to throw a towel or anything over that in order to use the bathroom on any level. And we had one bathroom at the time, and I was like, I
Oh
refuse to use that
no.
bathroom. Get rid of the mirror. And so, yeah, no, it affected me in that point because I was, I was old enough I can't remember how old I was. And it was 1992 Candyman was released, right? Yeah, so
That
then I would
sounds
have
about right.
snuck in on opening night because I was not 18 at that time. So I would have been like 16. And that movie got me. I'm excited for this one as well. We watched the trailer a couple times here on the show, and it's interesting. And I love the way urban legends help make people react. Like we take it as part of our
Oh
culture.
yeah.
We believe in some of these, right? Like Bloody Mary. When I grew up, Bloody Mary was the thing. You say Bloody Mary 3 times in the dark, and supposedly she'll appear. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Tons of urban legends, and so the theory behind it and how it reacts to each of us in our own minds and what we think of it and what it can bring to life, that is really fascinating, and Candyman nails all of that.
Oh, it like it's it's so interesting to me too because the urban legend of Candyman is also something that's very rooted in a lot of the sort of systemic issues that we have in America. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not as fantastical. Like it's a story that's rooted in sort of this like racial hatred, and that makes it, in my opinion, all the more terrifying because those are issues that we continue to live with every day, and it's very interesting how it's tied together,
Oh
that
yeah.
it doesn't feel, I definitely Bloody Mary and like Light as a Feather and all those fun things we did all of them, but all of those have this sort of like distance, almost like
Yeah.
they feel like stories, but something about Candyman, it like, no, this feels like we're telling the story of somebody, right?
Yep.
So yeah, it's scary, and I'm excited, and I think Nia DaCosta is an incredible director.
Mm-hmm.
Her film Little Woods is wonderful. I mean, she just got Captain Marvel too, so clearly
Yeah.
she knows what she's doing,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm very excited to see how she sort of takes this material.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. I'm sad that it was pushed back, but I completely
Yeah.
understand why it was pushed back.
Hmm.
And it does suck. COVID blows. Are you excited for the movie Spiral?
I am very excited for Spiral. I got really hyped there for a second. That was a lot of energy at once.
It's
Um,
all good. I'm super excited.
so speaking of sneaking into R-rated movies, the first Saw film is the first R-rated movie I ever snuck into
Oh,
because
nice.
I'm only 30. But that was the movie I snuck into, and I remember being just blown away by the first Saw, because Saw
Yeah.
as a franchise is, I like to think of it like similarly to how the Blair Witch Project and Scream have sort of been, pop culture thinks of them in sort of a joking manner at this
Yep.
point
Mm-hmm.
because of like endless parody, the
Of
scary
course.
movie franchise. And I think that Saw is the same way, where because a lot of the latter sequels, they started getting more and more kind of ridiculous.
They
And
usually do.
yeah, it's like, I think the what is the most creative way we can kill this person started to take, precedence over story. But that first Saw film is still so scary and so effective, and
Yeah.
the storyline is so good, and that end reveal is still just like, it's just such good horror storytelling.
I
So
agree.
to go back into this world and I think focus more on story and less on what's the weird contraption we're building for this one,
Hmm.
that I think is going to be really cool. And I think that's what they've needed to return to this whole time.
I agree. I read a really good article in Fangoria. They had a couple of interviews and finding out that it's part of the Saw universe. So it's going on at the same time Saw is going on. So a lot of people are like, I don't want a remake. I don't want this. And it's not a remake. It's in the same universe. So it's going on at the same time. And back then, Saw was scary as fuck.
Oh yeah.
We had nothing like that. I mean, we had our shockumentaries, Cannibal Holocaust, things like that, but Cannibal Holocaust was banned all over the place for many years. When Saw came out, that was a whole other genre that people were being introduced to that may have never seen Cannibal Holocaust, right? That was done in the 70s.
Right.
So you have a whole new generation that's coming up and seeing this film for the first time, like Hostel. I talk to younger generations when they that have already seen these types of films. You have, you know, Hostel and Saw and all these torture type of horror films, and I guess Saw was nothing. And I'm like, not of its time. Back when it came out, there was nothing like this on the market that was hitting people like this. It was on a totally different level. And so,
And I would say what's also very interesting is, so when we had this sort of like, I think a lot of people call it like torture porn, but you know, or just like extreme American horror.
uh-huh,
When we had this sort of boom that it was happening, this is also, you know, these are all like kind of post 9/11 films. So
yeah,
these are definitely, you know, we just all witnessed something like horrible
oh
happen.
yes,
And so now it's like we all kind of had that blanket desensitization like right off the bat, because we all kind of collectively experienced this massive trauma of seeing, you know, something horrendous in real time. So it makes complete sense to me that a lot of these horror movies are then going to get more and more extreme, because it's like, well, real life just got real extreme.
oh yeah,
So the fantasy world, we need to like push it. And I think at a certain point, like maybe we pushed it a little too far, which is why we don't see these films as prominently
mm-hmm,
anymore. But it makes total sense to me that that was the trajectory of horror after this. I'm like, no,
yeah,
this tracks. And you know, the last time we had this like a big extreme horror boom like that, like the exploitation era,
mm-hmm,
it's, you know, right around the time of like Vietnam, which was also televised. It was the first time war was televised.
yeah.
So yeah, horror is always like ebbing and flowing with whatever is happening in the world. And you know, the Saw films, I think they're a big part of that response to, you know,
Oh yes.
seeing this extreme violence in the news.
Oh, for sure. And then the Siberian film comes along talking about pushing
Oh
boundaries
yeah.
and you know things. So and that one most people haven't seen because again, that one movie was banned as well. In my
Hmm.
country, I couldn't find it. I couldn't see that film. So I had to have it imported in by my friend Dillinger Banks and Batty Page. They sent me the DVD because I wanted to know what this was about. I wanted to know what the big hubbubaloo was about this film. I read a lot of things about it, right? And I read different reviews, but it's not good enough. I need to see it. I need to see what
Right.
everyone is up in arms about. And yeah, that one kind of pushed and challenged numerous levels in the horror
Oh
industry.
yeah. Films like a Serbian film and Salo and
Yeah,
Martyrs, those are the films where it's like, I can Martyrs I can actually watch more than that, because I don't know, that one doesn't hit me quite as much. But
right.
a lot of these extreme horror, it's like, okay, I had my one. I'm good now.
Yeah,
I've
exactly. I
seen
don't.
it. We're good.
We're good. I don't need to see it again. But at
No,
least
I
you
don't need to
had.
revisit this.
Yeah, and you got the experience. There's people who will not even watch that film, and they have a wrong idea of what's happening in that film. And I'm like, look, it's not as. I mean, it's bad, but there's scenes that
Mhm.
you don't actually see. Your mind actually sees it, not what your
Right.
eyeballs don't physically see these things happening. You hear the noise, you see the man, and then your brain puts that together.
Hmm.
That in order to actually understand the movie and see it and want to know more about it, I always suggest to watch it. I know that movie cannot be handled, just like Cannibal Holocaust cannot be handled by some people,
Hmm.
right? Because that's very graphic. But I always tell people at least watch it once so you can make an educated decision on it instead of already judging it by what you heard. Because you're listening
Right.
to other influences, right? Because you haven't seen it, but you're hearing this person, bash the shit out of the film. And then you're hearing this person say this about the film. go watch it yourself.
My personal stance on it is like I want people to always know what your limits are.
Oh, of
But if
course.
you recognize that this is something out of your limit,
Don't watch
then
it.
it is not your place to then like critique or judge the film. Like it should be something of like, these are things that I've heard, but I personally have never seen it because I can't, so I can't add anything to the conversation. That's what I
Mm-hmm.
wish more people would do. But instead, what ends up happening is we have people who have not seen these extreme films. And, the film gets mentioned. So we'll use a Serbian film as the example of
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I think I'm going to watch a Serbian film. And they're like, oh my gosh, it's terrible. It's awful. Like it's
Yeah,
atrocious. Don't watch it. And it's like, well, if you haven't seen it, then you are not giving like an educated response on this because you genuinely don't know. You're parroting things that you've heard. And in that instance, I wish people would say, like, I personally haven't seen it. I've heard these things, but good luck if you want to watch it, but not for me. And like that
exactly.
should be where we kind of land. I think as a horror community, sometimes we have this like great deal of shame of admitting if we haven't seen something,
Oh my
or
God,
if
yeah.
we admit that like we have our limits. Like I know plenty of horror fans who love horror, but like they can't watch a movie where like a child dies because they're a parent. That
Right?
doesn't make them any less of a horror fan.
No.
It's like, no, that's where their limit is, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
totally acceptable place to be, because again, the beauty of horror is that there is something for everyone, and every movie is going to affect us differently. And I
Yep.
think that's why horror is one of the most prolific genres. It's been around since, the start of cinema, and it has never died down in popularity the way that fantasy films and sci-fi and westerns and
Yep.
action films, they kind of have had their drop-offs and like resurgences. Horror has always been popular across
Right.
the board,
Oh yeah.
and it's for that reason, because we're all secretly looking for like, what is the movie that's going to affect me?
Mm-hmm.
And when we find it, then those tend to be the ones that we love the most.
Oh yeah, I agree. Kit, any movie about the actual Holocaust, yeah, that's something on a whole other level. Have you seen
Yeah,
Cannibal Holocaust? The word Holocaust is in there, but it's nothing to do with Jewish people.
correct.
It is about cannibals in the Amazonian jungle. Have you seen Green Inferno? That one
I
is
have
written.
seen I
Yeah,
have seen
Green.
Green Inferno, and Green Inferno, um and here's what's interesting, and this is, we get into like this weird murky territory.
Yeah,
So Cannibal Holocaust is this extremely violent, very graphic film.
very.
It
Hmm.
does have instances of actual animals dying
Yes, it
on
does.
screen. They're actually, sort of invading this tribe of people, like real people who
Hmm.
live here, and using it for, sort of an entertainment aspect. And then when something similar, as far as like using an actual tribe for Green Inferno, um, it comes this murky territory where it's like we had very different ideas of what was acceptable in like the 60s and 70s,
Oh
when
yeah.
a lot of these exploitation films happen, versus today. So I tend to have mixed feelings, because I watched Green Inferno and I was like, oh, I love that this is such like a throwback to these exploitation films. But then like I have that button in my head where it's like, I wonder how these people are feeling now that like all these strangers like showed up, stayed with them for like a couple months, and then pieced out. Like, what did that do to them? Like, I don't
Hmm.
know. So I have this weird sort of constant like moral debate of like, what is acceptable for us to do as creators? Like,
Yeah, invading someone else's territory. I mean, I gather
mhm.
having that permission, but who gave that permission?
Right, who made that decision? Like,
Yeah.
who's in power here, right? And
Oh,
that
of course.
becomes really difficult sometimes to kind of justify that as creators. I mean, when I was at the drive-in and we were watching The Shining, I had this moment where I was watching Shelley Duvall and I'm like, God, she is just so incredible in this movie. And then you now have like the knowledge that like Kubrick basically like mentally tortured her on
Yeah.
set for
Hmm.
months, and I'm like,
You see her character
oh,
and you know the background of it, and it's just like, oh
yeah,
my God, my heart breaks.
it makes it so hard. And then it's like, and we're saying, oh, he's this genius, he's this incredible person. It's like, but are you a genius if you have to like
break somebody
mentally
mentally.
abuse like your talent. And it, has all these questions of like, as creators, like what,
Mm-hmm.
where are the lines that we have to get what we need out of somebody, like to get that scream, to get that moment of authenticity, like what do we
Mm-hmm.
do? And I think that's becoming a pretty popular conversation
Yep.
in the world of film right now. And I guess it's, everybody kind of has their personal limits, and consent is very important, even for something like, yeah, sure, you can psychologically mess with me for months, that's cool. But make sure your talent knows what's coming.
Right. Well, look at the director of The Exorcist, William.
Hmm.
Oh, and what did he do to his people? Right. Physically hurting several of the actresses on the film, making it very cold in Reagan's room, and just doing the
Hmm.
things that he did, gunshots, shooting off a live gun to get the reaction, tying a rope around mom and having her yanked. I mean, she had spinal issues after that.
Right.
I understand the directors want that real reaction, but when do we say enough is enough? Like with mental and emotional and physical abuse of our actors and actresses, and then this happened a lot in the older genres of our films. Like I
Hmm.
doubt it's going on now. I don't know if it's going on now. Maybe it is. It just seems like there's less and less of that nowadays than it was back to the 70s and 80s.
I think we just have a greater sense of accountability,
Yeah.
and there's also a bigger sense of transparency because we have like social media. So we have
Mm-hmm.
people who are, taking videos on set. We have people
Yes.
who are live tweeting, what's going on today. So if something were to happen, we're going to know about it.
Right.
And that's a big difference between, the films that were made during sort of like the exploitation period, or just in the 70s and 80s in general, is
Mm-hmm.
there, that accountability didn't really exist, because if you weren't there,
You didn't see it.
then it's a matter of, well, who do you believe? Whereas
Mm-hmm.
now it's like, oh, if an actor blows up at somebody, or if a director like starts freaking out and screaming at people, like that's on YouTube in 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure it is. You're held accountable by the internet. I mean,
Oh yeah.
internet didn't become out for public use until 1995. So you have from 1995 and beyond, you don't know anything unless there's people that are doing documentaries on these films to bring out what has happened. And then it's a he said, she said thing because there's no real evidence of anything physically
Mhm.
happening, right? You just have
Yeah.
the words.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I'm glad things have been evolving. Uh,
I am too. Change is good. It's a good thing.
yeah, change is good. I know not all of us are, down with change, but in some things it's very good. And see the evolution of horror films as well is really nice to
Mhm.
see.
Agreed completely.
Carolyn Williams stated she'd like to see more gender diversity in horror. What are some of the new frontiers you would like to explore in horror?
Ooh, so yes, gender is that's a big one for sure, for sure. But one of the avenues that I am most interested in is I'm looking to see more more diversity in not only just casts, but
Hmm.
also in stories, in the stories that we learn. Because you know as a woman, I spent my whole life trying to identify with characters that were likely men, or characters that were straight.
Hmm.
But I'm also a white person. So I can see myself in pretty much any film, any genre. There's at least one
Yep.
white person. Whereas there are so many horror films that do not have any people of color, that do not have, like anybody who has differing abilities, people who are, in wheelchairs. That's not very
Yep.
that's not very populous in a lot of horror films.
No.
Queer characters that
Hmm.
aren't just like the token character. I would love to see more than that, because I think that it's time that we've all gotten to a point where we understand that like we don't need something to be specifically us exactly in order to relate to it.
Right.
And the more diverse our storytelling becomes, so I want a horror film that is from a Black woman writer who is in a wheelchair. I would love to see a horror film from a non-binary person. Like I would love to see like a non-binary person um, write and direct a film that's like body horror or
Right.
like an exorcism, like something like feeling incorrect in your body. I would love that because that is a perspective that we're lacking.
That they can only
And
give. Yeah.
yeah, that they can only give. So I want to see a lot more of not just, we cast somebody, but like what is the story that is being told? Because I want to be able to have the ability to see a world and the emotion of fear from
Mm-hmm.
a perspective that isn't my own. I know what scares me. I
Yep.
know what bothers me. I know what things in the world kind of make me scared. I want to know how that is for other people. And
Mm-hmm.
I try to harken us back to there's a lot of like memes and things that will come around where it'll be like, what is something that, women know that men usually don't? And it's like how to carry your keys through all your knuckles, how to keep your hair down so that your ponytail can't be used to pull, how to pretend to talk on the phone, all these things that we innately have picked up over the years to keep ourselves safe.
Oh
And
yeah.
then men hear about it and they're like, what? I didn't even know that was a thing that you would be scared of. Well, so what else are we missing? Like what are the things that scare other intersections of identities that I don't know about because I don't live that life?
Right.
I want to learn. I want to know what the world looks like to other people, and doing it through horror I think is the perfect way to
Oh,
to
for sure.
express that.
You're looking into a window and you're seeing into their life. There's lots that we don't understand about other colors, other religions, other sexes because we don't live that life. So we don't actually see it. I mean, you get to see whatever you hear on the news or whatever the
Mhm.
latest YouTube is or what people are tweeting, but that's completely different than actually seeing the experiences that they're coming from in the films.
And especially if it's coming from the authentic voice of a lived experience.
Right.
All too often I think in because horror is so male dominated and is also just a very white dominated culture, that a lot of these stories are written about other people from people who don't have that lived experience. And that's
Mm-hmm.
not to say that like men can't write great women characters, or a person of color can't write a good non-person of color character. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying though is that we're not at the point where we've had enough people actually getting to tell their own stories. And we need
Yep.
more of that. We need people telling their own stories.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I get it. It's I really enjoy international films because
Mhm.
it brings you into their world, like over in China, Japan, and places like that you don't normally see, or their culture. And international films are really great for bringing their culture into their films because it's their life, it's what they see, it's what they do. So as international films go, we get to peer in that window and see how they live and how they react and what their urban legends are,
Mhm.
and how they do their experiences. That's what I enjoy about international films.
And one thing that I love about international films too is that even just the way that we relate to
Mm,
things that are quote unquote spooky are
yeah.
completely different. Like if you have a ghost story that's made in America, like the United States, then there has to be like a justification for the ghost. We need to know, why is this ghost specifically here? What do they want? We need to know all these things about this ghost. But then you look at like a J horror, so like a ghost story from Japan, there's a ghost because there's a ghost, and everyone's like, oh, there's a ghost, and then
Mm-hmm.
they move on with it. There's no need to
Yeah.
get into, well, why is it here? Because it's here. Like we're,
Yeah.
we're done now, we're moving forward. And I love that about watching international cinema, because just even the construction of how fear is sort of described and depicted
Yep.
is so different from
Mm-hmm.
culture to culture. And there are plenty of cultures where, I mean, I love watching like Mexican horror films,
Mm.
because death is something that uh, is celebrated once a
It is
year, where
very
it's like
celebrated. Yeah.
we're gonna have Dia de los Muertos and we're going to like honor our dead. And like that's totally a different culture than other places where it's like the dead stay dead, and I,
Yeah.
I just love that. I love being able to learn more about, lives that are not mine, and doing so through a medium like horror films.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ju-on and the remake of North American version of The Grudge, it
Hmm.
shows the differences right there.
Oh yeah.
You
Oh
watch
yeah.
Ju-on, you watch the original Grudge, and then you watch the North American remake. And you see the big differences in the storytelling in both of those films. You see where it's North American, and you see where
Oh
it
yeah.
loses that feel that Ju-on actually bring. There's many people who did not realize that was a film previously made internationally. And so I love introducing them to The Grudge. I'm like, go watch Ju-on, the original.
Yes.
You're going to see the differences, and you're gonna enjoy it. You're gonna enjoy it better than the North American version, because I didn't care for the North American version.
I didn't either.
Yeah. We have a question from Dillinger Banks. As horror movies have evolved, backstories have become more common, whereas older horror movies gave you very little. Do you think horror antagonists need to have backstories?
I do not think they need to have backstories. And if they're going to have backstories, I want it to be something that doesn't sound like a campfire tale,
Yes.
so to speak,
Yeah.
because I think that it becomes a little bit too convenient.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I always loved about, the early Halloween movies is that you really don't know what's going on. He's
Yes.
just killing people, and then as things have gone on, like, you start incorporating all of these different backstories, and they got more ridiculous, and they don't usually make sense with a lot of them, and that can get really frustrating. But I understand the need
Yeah.
to introduce a backstory, because I
Mm-hmm.
think, going back to when we were talking about the differences in ghost stories, I think a lot of times, like, Western cultures, like, they want to know why, and if they're not
Yes.
told why, then they're mad. It's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
why did he do it? I don't understand, why did he do it? um but I think it's, people need to learn to sit in their discomfort of, sometimes you don't get to know. um
Right.
sometimes
Right.
sometimes it's not going to be something that is that easy, and to me that leads to a lot of the fear of not knowing. And the fear of not knowing, our bodies and our brains hate that feeling. Like, we as humans, we like patterns, we like being able to connect things,
That we do.
we like things to feel complete. So when we don't know something, it just bothers us, and it gets at us, and it gets under our skin, and we want to figure it out. So I think I wish more people didn't give backstories, because I want people to sit in their discomfort a little more often.
Right.
But I understand why it's become so almost mandatory to have a backstory. I get it. I don't like it, but I get it.
Right. And a lot of the times they give you a backstory so they can keep dragging the franchise out.
Right.
And Halloween is
Exactly.
one of them. They just,
Yes.
I mean, Halloween 3, I love that film as it's in its own right. But after that, they start bringing in more and more stuff. And you know that, okay, we're going to have another 30 more shows. And how much more ridiculous. Hellraiser, for example, is another one.
Hmm.
3 was okay, but it started getting kind of crazy after 3. And the same thing with Friday the 13th and Halloween, and Nightmare on Elm Street. But they do it to also keep it alive and keep moving and making money off of that film, right? And they do it
Right.
now in all these superhero action films with Superman and Spider-Man. How many do we need? And then there's
I
another
know.
backstory that's added on to that. And it's like, oh my God, you're basically killing it.
And it's giving people, people eventually, we just get fatigued by it, because it's like, I don't need to see yet another version of the same story. Like,
Right?
give me something new. But the problem that we run into is that in order for, film is one of those art forms where it's where art and commerce meet, because films are expensive to make. They're really expensive to make.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of times, a lot of these financiers are nervous about putting money into something that they don't know is going to guarantee that return. So
Mm-hmm.
we end up with these bigger properties, because like, something that I think about a lot, and this is, regardless of anyone's personal feelings on the film, but over the years, Adam Green has been very open about how many people pirated the Hatchet films, and
Yep.
how it impacted the success of that franchise and what he was able to do with it. Because this is, for lack of a better answer, this is one of the last, modern slasher characters. And you would think that people would have been so excited to support this, but they stole it.
Yeah.
So now what that does is it sends a message to studios and financiers of, we will pay to go to the theater to watch yet another remake of this iconic property from the 70s or 80s. But if you
Mm-hmm.
give us something new, we're going to steal it because we don't want to take that risk. And that's troublesome, and that hurts new and creative
Oh
projects.
yeah, definitely does.
So it becomes really difficult to explain, like, it's not about like the personal thing. I know a lot of people are like, oh well, it's access, or oh well, I don't want to pay for it if I'm not going to like it. And it's like, well, that used to not be an option. You would
Right.
go to the video store and you would judge your box art, and if you didn't like it, tough. Like, that's just how it works.
Yeah.
um and if we want more original storytelling and original properties, we unfortunately, like, we have to put our money where our mouth is, because otherwise it's just going to be the same things over and over and over again,
It is.
because those have been proven to make money.
Right. And again, independent filmmakers, this is the problem that they have, because they have a vision of something different. They have a vision of what they see, and it's just needing the money to back it up. But studios are having a hard time backing it up because it's not something that they are aware that if it's going to take off, are they going to get back what they put in as a budget? And
Right.
it kind of sucks because it hurts us as fans. This is why it's so important for us as fans of any genre, horror or comedy, is to support those independent filmmakers, put their words out there, get them out on to the internet, do YouTube reviews, do articles on web shows or whatever it is, to get their names out there, to possibly show the industry, hey, we as fans, we're craving something new, something different. And these independent film creators, majority of them are doing exactly that. They're bringing us stuff new, but we don't hear about them. They'll make their circuit on a film festival, but how many people go to a film festival or know about it or
Right.
can afford to go? There's one that gets done in Toronto. I can't afford to go to Toronto to go see a film festival, but it doesn't come to my province. So there's many great films that I will never see or hear of because it went to a festival and I didn't get to see it. And that goes for a majority of independent films, unless it's something big and groundbreaking that media thinks it's big and groundbreaking, and they bring it to the forefront.
I agree completely. And I think sometimes we as fans don't recognize the power that we have with our voices. An example that I love to bring up is Jeremy Gardner's film The Battery. It's a zombie movie that was made for $6,000. It was made for nothing, but it
Yeah.
is one of the most fascinating zombie films because it's less about zombies and more about, surviving in, like, just suburban America after, the zombie apocalypse has happened, and how do you survive? What do you do when you come across these abandoned homes? It's a really, really interesting film. And it was one that sort of popped up out of nowhere. You could buy it just like from the filmmakers directly. I mean, he
Mm-hmm.
was shipping it out of his house, and enough like podcasts and reviewers and people kept talking about it and kept talking about it that it eventually got picked up for like an actual release. I think Scream Factory put it out.
Yep.
Yeah, so Scream Factory puts it out. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like that movie would have otherwise probably gone completely unnoticed if we hadn't all been so encouraging of like, no, this is good and we like this. And now you look at someone like Jeremy Gardner who is still making movies. I mean, after Midnight, I think, just hit Prime, and it's like, if it wasn't for the power of the fan,
Yep.
what would have happened?
Oh yeah, our voices need to be heard, and they can be heard. All we have to do is speak up. And and
Hmm.
and this is what's so great about having the internet now. We have YouTube, we have Twitch, we have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have Instagram. We can get their names out there. We have IMBD, which is a great place for reviewing. If you watch a movie on Amazon Prime, you have the ability to give that review. Every time you give a review, it puts
Yeah.
them in an algorithm, and that algorithm gets them pushed up to the top. It's just like watching your favorite streamer. The more viewers that streamer has, the higher up in the category it goes. So if we're watching independent films and we are able to give them a review, I highly recommend doing that, because you're not just giving yourself a voice, you're giving them a little bit of push up in the stats. and
Yeah.
might give your favorite film a actual spotlight somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
No,
part of this
absolutely.
I'm part of this horror app called Slasher, and they had a film like you can put in there your films that you have watched. And I was looking for a film called Cherokee Creek. I really enjoy this film. It's an independent film. It's called Cherokee Creek. It was made by Todd Jenkins. He also acted in it. I don't know if you've seen it.
I've
It is
not seen it, but I'm interested to hear you talk about it.
definitely go and check it out. It's a 80s style horror
Okay.
comedy, but it's raunchy, but it's fun. It's got guy humor in it. And I know a lot of people are all upset. Some people are all upset about the guy humor, but it's a guy film. It's a guy humor, right? You can't get upset about that. Having people put reviews and putting that up there, it gets a name for themselves. They're actually able to put it out there. I highly suggest people go and watch that film as well. But yeah, we put our reviews out there. We put our voices out there. We help push them up. And I think that's something that we all need to do. Is if you see something, you write a blog about it. Maybe you're not a person who does write a blog, but maybe you tell a few friends. They tell a few friends, and so forth and so on.
Or even something as, it sounds so silly, but like put the hashtag of what movie you're watching if you tweet about it.
Yeah,
Like the movie Host from Shudder, it
yeah,
was on Good Morning America this week because things like hashtagging it have made it get to get the reach that it deserves outside of just horror fans. Like if you're a
yeah,
horror fan, everyone knows about this movie. But if
yeah.
you're not a horror fan, you probably don't have Shudder. You probably don't know where to even find this movie. But the fact
Exactly.
that people kept talking about it and then Good Morning America is like, what is this trending movie? That's incredible. That shows like this is the power that we have to do good things. I think a lot of times people like to look at the internet, and don't get me wrong, the internet is a very toxic place sometimes. Sometimes it is just a nightmare to
Oh
navigate,
yeah.
but it doesn't have to be. It
Mm-hmm.
can be this source of good and encouragement and just positive, like, no, we love this. Like, please give us more of this. Like, we have the capability to do that. I wish we would do it more often. I wish we celebrated the things that we love
Yeah.
before we criticize the things that we don't.
Exactly. And that would be nice. Nuclear Vamp wants to know, in horror movies with the new special effects, the CGI, do you prefer the old style of practical effects over CGI, or do you prefer CGI?
I prefer practical effects. I'm a practical girl at heart. I don't dislike CGI because sometimes it can be kind of funny.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, for sure, for sure. I'm with
like
you.
I just watched The Pool on Shudder, which is a Taiwanese film about a guy who gets trapped in a diving pool that has drained, and a crocodile shows up, or an alligator, whatever it is. And when it's stationary, it looks real good. And then it moves, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
that's a computer. But it kind of makes it fun because then I'm thinking about this guy like fighting what is probably a man in like a green bodysuit, which is very funny to me.
Yeah.
But at heart, I am a big practical gal. I love the artistry behind practical effects
Yes.
because they're incredibly difficult.
They are.
Um, so but I also understand. I also understand that like CGI allows you to do things like bigger and better. I think the true modern horror effect should be like a combination where like it's majority practical, but like maybe there's a little bit of smoothing with
Yeah.
CGI. Like CGI, I think should always be like a not a buffer, but sort of like it gives it a little bit more oomph, but we shouldn't be relying
Right.
on CGI.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a practical effects girl. I love practical effects. Tom Savini, Nicotero. I love what
Oh
they
yeah.
do, the creativity that they can bring to it, and the realistic stuff that you can CGI. You can usually tell it's fake, and
Hmm.
practical. It can get a little. It can get a little crazy, like in some trauma films.
Right.
Um, but it also brings a more realistic look to it. I think a little bit of everything without overpowering without overpowering CGI. I think it would be beneficial to have a little bit of everything in it.
I agree. I think too, if CGI is used in what I would say like intentional ways, I'm a little bit more okay with it. I have this like weird obsession with how like uncanny valley the entirety of the Midnight Meat Train looks, because everything is CGI
Yeah.
and the blood is like way too reflective and way too shiny, and obviously nothing looks real in that movie, but because across the board nothing looks real, it's like almost artistically pleasing to look at in a weird way. It
Right.
like tricks your brain a little bit. um but whenever it's like jarring CGI, so when it's, you know, some of it's really good and then like boom, something that's not good,
Yep.
that's when it's like, oh no, I don't like this at all. So I guess if it's all a mess, then I don't notice it as much.
You won't notice it as much because it's just a big hot mess.
Hmm. Exactly.
Dillinger Banks wants to know, I like the idea of rebooting the Sleepaway Camp series or making something new that features a transgendered character played by an actual transgender person. I want to see their life experience to show me something I've never seen in a horror movie before. Do you think a transgendered killer can be created that will be respectful without watering down the horror experience or pissing people off, saying transgendered persons are being demonized?
So you just entered one of my favorite places to go. So, as I had mentioned earlier, my wife is transgender. My
Hmm.
wife also writes about, she specifically writes about trans representation in film, across all genres. Sleepaway Camp is one of our favorite movies. I might have Angela on me somewhere. She may have fallen off my hair. Yep, there she is. There she is. Angela's here with me today. um, but there are some people who really, really hate Sleepaway Camp because of that representation. There are others, my wife included, that love the character of Angela and love that
Oh, yeah.
representation.
It's a great
Because
film.
the thing that Sleepaway Camp does, whether intentional or not, and my belief is that this was not intentional, they lucked into this, is that Sleepaway Camp is not a story about a trans character, but it is a story about the dangers of forcing someone to live in the gender identity that is not theirs. Because we
Hmm.
know that Angela is actually Peter. Had Peter been able to have been raised as a boy, would this have happened? Would he
Right?
have been targeted the way that he was at camp? Would he be as reclusive and quiet? Would he have a lot of these issues that
Hmm.
Angela has? Probably not.
No. Yeah, I
So,
agree.
but because of her legacy as this sort of trans icon, especially once you get into Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3, where it becomes canonic that yes, she is trans and she is living as a woman and embracing this sort of circumstance. I think that this would be something that I would love to see written by a trans woman, and yes, played by a trans actor.
Right.
Um, because I think that this is one of the only examples in horror that the transgender community has. A lot of the other
Yeah.
examples that we have are either people who are not trans, they're just cross dressing, looking at you, Norman Bates.
Yep.
Um, or it's presented when we look at something like the Black Bride in the Insidious films, where
Hmm.
it's presented as like, oh, they're a problem because of this.
Right.
Angela's one of the only ones where it's like, no, she's being bullied and she's someone's trying to sexually assault her, like that's like an
Hmm.
adult, and she's being harassed. Like, that's why she's killing people. It has nothing to do with her debated transness. It has everything to do with how everyone else is treating her.
Yep.
So I think that it could be done. I really do. Will everyone be happy about it? No, because people are not happy with anything. Because
No.
again, just like things we've been talking about with other identities, the transgender community is not a monolith. There will be some folks who will love this idea, and there will be
Hmm.
some that will hate it and protest it at every chance they get. And honestly, both responses are valid because, again, it's all about our personal relationships with horror.
Right.
Um, I wish that it would get done, though, personally. I think that it would be great. But on the one and only condition that eat shit and live stays, because that line is just chef's kiss. So
Yeah.
good.
I think it would be a great aspect if it was written by trans and played in that scenario.
Mm-hmm.
I know, was it Halle Bailey? Oh my God, I can't say her name. I know she recently turned down a role because
Mm-hmm.
of the pressures that she was having and the threats that she was receiving from all different people on whether it's trans people, straight people, whatever it was. She was getting all different kinds of things, and she recently stepped down from. I think she was supposed to play a trans character.
Yes, and this has been happening more and more recently, and it's because, in all honesty, the transgender community, there are trans actors. There are
Oh
plenty
yeah.
of trans actors that are trying to get work, and they can't even get work playing characters that have their same lived experiences. So I know Scarlett Johansson was another one where you
Mm-hmm.
look at someone like Scarlett Johansson or Halle Berry in this instance, where they are these big high profile actors that are like, oh, this is going to be a great meaty role for me. I can't wait to
Yeah.
really figure out this person's life, where actual trans actors are like, well, this just is my life. And like, you don't have to do any extensive research because I've lived this and I can do this, but they're not being given that same access. So we have a tendency to award cisgender actors, our Jared Leto's of the world, our Eddie Redmayne in The Danish Girl, where we award them like, oh, you're so brave for playing a character outside of your gender,
Mm-hmm.
whereas actual transgender people can't get work. So it's like, yeah, you know what? Maybe take a back seat until trans people can actually tell their own stories. And then yeah, now we can play around with stuff, and we can have people, play any character that their heart content that is to their heart's content. But we can't do that until we're actually giving fair access and opportunities to the people that this is their own story.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, how can you? I mean, you can research a character. Halle Bailey could research somebody who is transgender, but that research doesn't really give you an inside view of their life and what they have experienced. You're being told a story. We're reading a book, and that's how you're getting your research. You're not really living and breathing what they are doing in their footsteps.
Right. And it's not to say that actors could not certainly be capable enough to give good performances
Mm-hmm.
in this way. I mean, we look at like a Hilary Swank in Boys Don't Cry,
Yep.
and like that performance is unbelievable. The issue is not a matter of can they do it, it's a matter of should they.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, until trans actors are given those same opportunities, then
Mm-hmm.
it is unfair, and they are being silenced outside of telling their own stories, and that's really not a good thing.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Patricia Arquette gave her in her speech when she got, I think it was a Golden Globe or an Emmy for The Act. She talked about her sister Alexis, who is no longer with us, and she's like, the second she transitioned, her career tanked, and it's because of transphobia. And it's not to say there weren't trans characters performing in films; they just weren't giving the opportunity to actual trans people.
Yeah. And Tell Bella Fit makes a good point as well. I don't think it will ever be that way because if you look at all the roles of people trans or not, the higher profile actors are always picked unless the companies start giving more people a chance.
Yeah.
I agree with
Yeah.
that as well. They targeted Hallie for a reason,
Yep,
right?
they wanted that big name. They want to be able to say, Academy Award winner so and so playing this character. It's actually funny that earlier when we were talking about actors and like changing characters. Um, the conversation that I have with a lot of people before is when talking about Tropic Thunder, where it's like if Tropic Thunder were made today, then the pushy, over the top, like snooty actor who's just doing this because they want the Oscar, that character would be a trans role, because that's like what is happening now. It's like the Danish Girl, Dallas Buyers Club, like, oh, they're so brave, give them a trophy. It's like,
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
people live this way. People go to the grocery store like this. Like, this is just people's lives. I don't know why suddenly you're brave for this.
And that is true as well. A lot of the films that were made back in the past, not even that long ago, if they were made today, there would be an uproar. There would be one of the biggest films. It's one of my favorites, and if it was made today, I don't even think it. I think they would be bullied. Which is White Chicks by the Wayans brothers.
I like to, Laverne Cox actually came up with this expression, at least I think she did. I got it from her. But there are movies that we can love critically. And I am queen of loving, I have so many problematic faves. Movies that I love that I know this is not okay, or movies that I love and it's like, this has not aged well. But you can
Right.
love movies critically. You can love something while simultaneously acknowledging this is a product of its time and we do not talk this way anymore. Or you can love something and go, you know what, when they used this word at this time, it was not appropriate, but I love it knowing that like this is a symbol of what used to be acceptable in culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I were actually watching the movie Clueless not
Uh-huh.
that long ago. A movie that I love. I love
Uh-huh.
Clueless. Did not remember how frequently they use the R word in that movie.
Oh,
It's
yes.
constant. And it's
Mm-hmm.
one of those things that now like my 2020 brain is like, oh my gosh. But I also recognize that as a kid, it probably didn't register to me because that word was used on reality TV show. It was used by
Yeah.
my classmates. It was used so commonly because we hadn't culturally been like, hey, you know what? We probably shouldn't do this. And that doesn't mean that it was okay to say it. Like we shouldn't have said it then either. But to act as if it was not socially acceptable at the
Right.
time when it was made is just being dishonest about what was happening at that time. It doesn't excuse it. It does
Oh, yeah.
explain it, and there's the difference there.
For sure. And I think that's what a lot of comedians have to deal with. I love comedy is funny, and I like comedians like Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock, and I like what they bring because they touch every boundary and they're not
Mhm.
afraid to cross it. They're not afraid to be like, okay, but they're also not making, I don't know how to explain it. They're not taking the subject and making fun of that subject. They're taking the subject and making fun of it as a whole. And they're not
Mhm.
picking out things. As a white woman, I was not offended in any way, with white chicks. I wasn't offended at all. I love the film. I love the way they represented white females. I thought it was fucking hilarious. I wasn't like, oh my God, this film has to go.
Mhm.
But I know people who have recently watched it for the first time and they were offended. And I'm like,
I
where do we stop being offended and just enjoy what it was actually being made of? If you go back into the 1950s and the 1960s, where color separation was still very prominent and very big in films and in public in the society at that point in time, do we say this should have never been made, or do we just say, okay, at that time, at that era, this was what life was like, and just enjoy it for what it was, not
I
what
think what we
society's turned it into?
I think what we have to recognize is we have to understand first context. When
Mm-hmm.
was this made? Was this how things were? But then we need to not be afraid to acknowledge it,
Oh yeah.
right? I mean, we look at these older films. Like if you look at the origin of zombie films,
Mm-hmm.
most zombie films, the early ones, that we're talking like, for example, the movie White Zombie, right? One of the
Yeah.
very first zombie films ever
Mm-hmm.
made. There are zombies that exist in that film, but it doesn't become a problem until, oh no, they're going to turn the white lady into a zombie. Now suddenly it's a problem. You didn't care when you had a bunch of Haitian zombies doing your work for you. That didn't
Right.
bother you. It bothers you because now that the person is white. So like you look at that and it's like, oh, that racism is palatable in this film.
Oh
But
yeah.
you can also look at it as like this is a very early horror film and it has its important historical context, but you have to be able to juggle both of those things in your head at
Right.
once. Of this is a very important movie historically speaking, it's also racist as hell. Like you have to be able to know that those two things exist at the same time.
Yeah.
When it comes to something like White Chicks, the reason that I'm not offended by it at all, because it's also the idea of comedy of punching up, right? Like
Yeah.
so as a white person, I have privilege as being a white person. People can make fun of me for my whiteness all day and that's fine because I am still recognizing I have this white privilege. I am not going to be disparaged in the world because I am a white person. So you know what? I can sit here and listen to these jokes because you know what? It's fine. When comedians punch down, that's when I have a little bit of an issue.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing lazier to me than like a male comedian being like, "Wives, they suck, huh?" And it's like, don't do that. Like, you don't need to punch down on a marginalized
Yeah.
gender identity. Like, that's not funny to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's not to say that like you can't make jokes that are playing with these sort of power dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
You absolutely can, but it's a matter of, who or what is the punchline. Like, if you are making a marginalized identity a punchline, that's lazy to me. You can tell jokes about different cultures. That's totally acceptable. I think someone like a Hannah Gadsby does it really well. I think Lil Rel Howery does it really well, where you can kind of have these discussions. But then you have people, I'm not gonna say names because I don't like to trash on individual people. But then you have comedians that do just actively punch down, where people become the punchline and not like actions or circumstances.
Right. Right.
And that can be hard. But comedy is very similar to horror.
Oh
Like, a
yeah, it
lot of
is.
times people who love horror also love comedy,
Mm-hmm.
because it's almost scientific in how it has to land, the same way that you have to like build up a scare. You have to do the
Right.
same thing with a punchline.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, they're pretty connected in that way.
Oh yeah, I think so as well. I was reading an article, and they were actually talking to Robert Englund, and Robert Englund recently said in the interview that I was reading that he liked to see a Nightmare on Elm Street story where Freddy also preys on the characters' fears over their sexuality. So not
Oh yeah.
right. And I thought that was kind of interesting. So maybe we might get something from Robert Englund in that genre from Nightmare on Elm Street, that where Freddy doesn't just only prey on them, but he preys on them because of their fears of their sexuality. I think it would be
I
kind of
would
interesting.
I would love that, because I am of the firm belief, Freddy Krueger, that's a drag queen. That is a drag character. The same, and a lot of times when I say that, people are like, "What are you talking about?"
Right,
Well, because drag doesn't necessarily have to mean like a personation of a gender. Like
right.
Lady Gaga, that's drag. Elvira, that's drag,
Oh yeah.
because it is somebody putting on a character. Freddy
Mm-hmm.
Krueger, that's drag. So considering just how gay Nightmare 2 is,
Oh
I
yeah.
think making it like just canonical, because that's what he does. He preys after the things that you have nightmares about. He gets into your fears. And if you are a, suburban kid living on Elm Street, and you're afraid of how the world's going to interact with your queerness, they're going to attack it. And that makes total sense that Freddy would attack that. The same way that I wish it had been a little bit more like obvious. Personally, I thought it was pretty obvious, but the way that Pennywise is attacking Richie Tozer in the It Chapter 2,
Yeah.
where like that's a queer character, and it is Pennywise is messing with him about that identity that he
Yeah, 'cause
has.
that's a fear.
So put that on Front Street. Put it on front of Elm Street. I would love it.
Right? Yeah, and it brings a different type of fear as well. And Freddy Krueger gets his strength to come into reality through that
Mhm.
fear. So I
Oh
think it would
yeah.
be definitely a good movie to get into. Uh
I think it would be great. And I think Robert Englund could still pull it off too. Like, I know he's getting in on some years.
he
He can
is.
still pull it off. I've seen what he looks like at conventions when it's like, I'm
Right.
putting the makeup on for the last time. He looks great. It
He
would be
does.
perfect.
He does. And I would love to see him come back as Mr. Krueger. We are getting to be about that time. It's 11:50. Before we
Mm.
go into anything else, I always ask this question: vampire or werewolf?
Oh my gosh.
I get the same reaction as when I ask. Like, you love
I
them both,
I
right?
love them both so much. But the thing is, I love writing werewolf stories, but
Mm-hmm.
for me, I'm vampire all day.
Yeah.
All my tattoos are vampire
Right
related.
on.
Friday Night's my favorite movie. I gotta go with the vamps.
Yeah, I love them both. And I look at them both as well. Okay, vampires have more ways to die and more
Hmm.
downfalls than the werewolf. The werewolf has one way to die, and you can walk in the sunlight, and you can still do those things. Of course, transformation will be very, very painful, but at least you can still do those things. Half of me wants to be vampire, half of me wants to be werewolf. I can be a werewolf vampire.
Vampires also get the luxury of fashion though,
Oh,
because
they do.
you can either
And
have like
love,
cool like Lost Boys leather jacket, or you can be like very
right?
regal. Like, you have options. there's layers to vampire fashion.
Oh, there definitely is. The werewolf is just there, right?
Yeah,
There's
you're gonna wake up naked and steal some kid's balloon. That's gonna be your life.
exactly, that will be your life. We have one last question. If you
Mhm.
could take over one horror franchise to add a movie to it as a director, which one would it be?
Ooh, okay, so I'm cheating a little bit because this is only technically a franchise. Um, I love the Carrie movie, and I
Oh,
am a complete apologist for its less than stellar sequel, The Rage Carrie 2, and also it has its remake and the
oh
made-for-TV
yes.
version, and it has a musical, so I'm considering it a franchise. I want a Margaret White story so badly. I have a short film available called Margaret, and it is a short little fan film about Margaret White being pregnant with Carrie. I am so fascinated by her
Oh,
as
that
a
sounds good.
villain. I love her portrayal in the book and when she talks about her past and her life, and I would love to see somebody do that on screen. I want to I want to make a Margaret White movie so bad.
That would be really awesome because the mother is very interesting in herself. Like, how did she become who she is right now?
Exactly.
Where can we find your short film? Where can we find your projects, things that you're working on besides Twitter?
Sure. So my Twitter is always the easiest. My
Yeah.
handle is just my name at
Mm-hmm.
BJ Colangelo. But if you go on Vimeo, all of my
Vimeo.
previous works are under the brand Sickening Pictures. That is the company that my former creative partner and I used to work under. I now work independently. So future projects, Twitter will be your best bet. But anything
Okay.
from the past, Sickening Pictures. That's where to
All
find
right.
it.
Perfect. I'm actually on Vimeo right now, so I can get a link for anyone who is interested in it. And they've got a lot of different little reels. So I'm just gonna drop this in here, so you
Awesome.
can actually go to their page on Vimeo. If you don't know what Vimeo is, it's just like YouTube.
Mhm.
So you can watch videos on it right there. Oh, see, Dillinger, you beat me to it. Uh, Reaper is saying, thank you, BJ, for the idea. Lost Boys added to Coffee Chat of Horrors along with Fright Night. Yes.
Yes, yes, yes.
When I do a regular Coffee Chat of Horrors where we're not interviewing anybody, I like to research horror films, sci-fis as well. And I go into the backstories, I get what the actors are saying, I look at interviews, I watch documentaries on the films, and I take that information, I compile it into a list, and Reaper makes the artwork for me so I can show to my community. And we go into the film and we learn about the film, how they made this, how actors were this, and so forth and so on. So that's a traditional coffee chat of horrors here. And then we have our special ones, like having our guests on and talking to them. So that's exciting, Reaper. I can't wait. Um, I just want to say thank you very much, BJ, for coming on to the show. It's been a very honor to have you here and
Thank you
discuss.
for having me. It's been nice to kind of talk about the genre I love so much, and especially thank you to your horde for having such incredible questions.
They definitely do. They love this stuff and they love having good conversation and the questions, and we're here for the conversation as well as the people. And when we bring people on and have those conversations, not only do we get to see different viewpoints, because we as a community, we talk and we have our viewpoints, but when we bring other people in from the outside that we don't normally talk to on a regular basis and get their input, it opens up our world a little bit more, right? So
Oh yeah.
thank you very much. And you can find all information on BJ over on Twitter at BJ Colangelo. I got it right, right? Also, her email is right there. You can find her on Instagram. Also, make sure you stop by that Vimo and check out Sickening Pictures, especially if you want to see the Margaret White. That's where Margaret White is, the
Yeah,
story of Margaret White.
Margaret lives there right now, and I
Yeah.
think the teaser for Labris is on there. So
Ooh.
that's also the full Labris video will end up on a different channel, but I'll post all of that when it happens
Oh,
sometime around
nice.
Halloween.
Ooh, yes, we will keep that in our calendars. You also have a little not a little write up, but a write up in 2 weeks that is coming on jump scares, right? Can you
Yes,
tell
I
us the name
do.
of that again?
So it'll be on the science of jump scares, and it will show up. I'll put it on my Twitter.
Perfect.
It will be as part of the blog for a very cool horror streaming service. And that's about as far as I can talk about
Ooh,
where it's going. So, I
interest
mean, I'm
peaked.
pretty sure you can figure out where it'll be published, but it's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm very excited to kind of dive in and do the big analysis on jump scares.
Awesome. I'm excited for that. I'm definitely going to be following it and watching it. Again, guys, if you want to check out more about BJ, please make sure you go to all of the links or all of the ats right there. Follow her on Twitter, Instagram. And if you want to get in touch with her, talk to her about upcoming projects or ideas, if she, whatever it may be, email is right there. If you're looking for a writer, make sure you check her out. She's right here. Thank you again so very much for being on the show.
And thank you for having me.
Oh, it was our pleasure. And I will keep in contact with you.
Sounds great.
Is there anything else that you would like to say before you go?
Um, watch more horror movies. Support them, buy them, don't pirate.
Exactly. Watch them and buy them. This is how we give independent films back. We give back to them for creating such awesomeness. Thank you again very much for being on the show. I hope you have a great rest of your Sunday.
Thank you. You all as well. I got through my whole cup of coffee in that. Thank you for that.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. Oh, there's our chat. Let me just close this out. I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with BJ. She is really awesome. How do you guys feel about the show? Did you enjoy the interview? I think so too, Dahi. Thank you. It's absolutely amazing coffee chat of horror. So much fascinating food for thought. Thoroughly enjoyed it today. That is amazing. She is really awesome. I enjoyed talking with BJ, getting her outlook, seeing her vision, getting the information, and it's always so nice to talk to other people in the horror industry.